Hey, greetings all. This is Gunner's Range. I'm Dudley, aka Gunner from my Marine Corps days. However, don't confuse me with the gunny, because if you think I'm a gunny, the gunnies will come kick my butt, and I don't want that. Hey, today I want to talk about, again, my favorite soapbox issue these days, and that's the Russo-Ukrainian war and the cowardice the West is showing just when things are really getting tough. Even worse, however, is the fact the Ukrainians actually have a chance to win this war if you could get the West to cut them loose. You know, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, the West jumped up and said, hey, we're going to support you 24/7. We're going to give you everything you need to win. And we have given Ukraine quite a bit of stuff, equipment and things of that, and the logistics, the kind of things you need to run a modern war, especially dumb steel. You can talk about the smart weapons all you want, but 155 round dumb steel, that's still real. That rules the battlefield even today. Smart weapons are great, but at $1 million a pop, you really can't afford to try and shoot individual tanks with smart weapons. Dumb steel still works. And as Joseph Stalin always said, artillery is the king of the battlefield. Infantry is the queen. And, well, you know what the king does to the queen. And that still is true today as it has been throughout history. When this show started, the West jumped right up and talked about all the help it was going to give Ukraine, support it, help it to win. And, to its credit, the West has dribbled in a lot of stuff. It's taken a good bit of time in most cases, but still the support has been there. The only problem is they don't want the Ukrainians to use it. It's one thing to tell them, yeah, you can have ATACMS, but, you can't really use it. We don't want you to actually hurt any Russians. So, you can have it, and you can do whatever you want with it in Ukraine, but not over the border. And all this does, it does what it's always done. It just encourages the Russians to keep prosecuting the war. And until the West finally, if ever, gives them an open door, I think there'll be a significant change in what's happening there now. And you've seen it in the Kursk operation. I mean, the Russian war machine is not what everyone thinks it is. And I've talked about this before as an intel officer. I spent many years studying the Soviet Union and Russia. The Russian military really hasn't changed much in terms of it. Yes, new weapons, new equipment, but they still don't allow NCOs or junior officers to make changes or make adjustments on the battlefield. So if something goes wrong with the centralized plan, well, then they got to call up a general and everything falls apart. And Ukrainians have been able to take advantage of that. But that can only go so far if the only time you're allowed to use all these wonder weapons we're giving them is when you can only use it in Ukraine. That sure is not going to stop the Russians from continuing to do what they're doing. Those of you out there with a military background, and probably some others as well, realize that anytime you fight a war, and U.S. has a history of this, when you fight a war to not lose, invariably you're going to lose. And that's what the West wants Ukraine to do. We don't want Russia to win, but we don't want you to win either, because we're afraid of Russia. And so, and it continues. The Danish Prime Minister, a woman, has bigger cojones than Joe Biden, Schultz, Macron, the Brits, all of them. Hers are bigger than all of them. Why? Because she says, give Ukraine everything it needs and get out of their way. Now, why is it a woman is the only one who seems to recognize the fact that Ukraine cannot win the way it's being held back now? Now, I should say, though, the Poles understand, and the Baltic states understand. They got it. You know why? Because they used to be part of that former Soviet Union. And they know which way Russia leans. And they know they're next. So give them credit. But all the others, it's the same stuff. Dribble the stuff in a little bit here, a little bit there, just enough to kind of keep Ukraine in the fight. But look, don't do any, don't go, don't cross the border. And I think that's probably why when you look at the operation in the Kursk, that's why the Ukrainians probably didn't say a damn thing to the West. And I don't blame them. Because if they had, you'd hear the same thing. Y'all, well, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to antagonize Russia. Don't, you can't do it. Well, Ukrainians have done it, and they've shown that the Russians are not as, other than what's going on in eastern Ukraine right now, the Russian military just isn't capable of stopping the Ukrainians if it gets into a maneuver warfare thing. The Ukrainians, to their credit, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, made a conscious decision to study Western methods of war and how the West teaches and its military. And to its credit, it is shown throughout this war that Ukraine thinks faster on its feet. They adjust quicker. They're able to take advantage of mistakes the Russians make. And yet through all this, what we've got is Western nations wringing their hands and saying, oh, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't do this. Now, how long does this have to go on? I mean, the way I'm seeing it right now, the West is happy to give weapons to Ukraine because it's just going to keep killing Ukrainians. And maybe that's what the whole plan is. We'll just let you fight until there's none of you left. And then we'll say, well, we did our best or we tried. But I am just, as a retired U.S. Marine, and for those of you out there with a military background, fighting a war not to lose is the surest way possible to lose. I mean, we can go back, we can look in Korea, look in Vietnam, look in Afghanistan, even in Iraq. We haven't prosecuted a war worth a damn since Desert Storm. And even that, really, when you got down to it, was not fought to win. Why? Because we could have gone into Baghdad then and probably taken Saddam Hussein out. But because of the political leanings from certain countries, it wasn't done. So what you're looking at here is another great example of how the West fights wars these days. We don't want them to win, but we don't really want to win either. Even worse, this thing about Russia and its nuclear weapons. Yes, how many times have the Russians already threatened to use nukes? What, at least a dozen times? And have they used one yet? No. And there's a reason for that. First of all, if you know anything about nuclear weapons, you know they have to be maintained. Now, I know the United States spends roughly $400 million a year to maintain our nukes. The Russians don't spend a penny. So there's quite a possibility that if they were to use them, the nuke might not go off, which would be, well, that'd be a killer for the Russians to nuke someone and not have the nuke explode, wouldn't it? Sometimes I think back to George Patton after World War II, and you wonder, maybe Patton was right, and we should have just done it then. I don't know. But point is this: we have a Western leadership starting right here in the United States, into Canada, Germany, France, the UK, that just cowardice. I keep asking myself, why are you even giving Ukraine these weapons? If you're not going to allow them to win the war, what is the point of doing it? You know, I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but my father, who was a World War II vet, in 1967, shortly before he died, he was listening to Walter Cronkite, the news, and he kind of got up and he just muttered. He asked himself a question, and it was, why are we fighting a war we don't want to win? And it was just as true now as it was then. Why are we letting the Ukrainians fight a war we don't want them to win? If we're going to give them the guns, if we're going to give them the logistics, the supplies, everything they need, let loose the dogs of war. I mean, that's the only way to fight a war. Well, again, I hope I haven't bored you too much, but there are times when I just feel like something has to be said. And again, I'm not trying to build up a huge following. That's not important to me. I just like the fact that I can put something out there on the internet and maybe some other people will see it and agree with me. So again, I'm Dudley from Gunner's Range. Thank you very much for viewing my video, and have a good evening.